Good day, Industrial Advisor listeners, and thank you for tuning in. If you have not subscribed, please do so by clicking subscribe wherever you podcast. Click the like button and hit the bell if you want notifications of when we put up new content. Leave us a comment about anything we discuss here today or general comments about the show. Now, let's get into it. Well, welcome to the Industrial Advisors Podcast. I am your co-host, Matt McGregor, along with Bill Condon. We're super excited to welcome Gary Chesson. Gary is the author of Creating Trinity. Gary Chesson is the founder of Trinity Partners, a Carolina-based full-service commercial real estate firm, and Trinity Capital Partners, a private equity industrial investment firm that has over $4 billion in assets working, and I think over 28 million square feet across the southeastern United States. In addition to being a serial entrepreneur, Gary is an avid fisherman, runner, passionate advocate for the homeless, which I can't wait to get into, as I am as well. Gary graduated from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, go Tar Heels. And he lives in Charlotte with his wife, Kim, of 31 years, and they have 3 daughters. Gary recently retired and wrote this book, reflecting back on his career, company, partnerships, which I love, family, and big one is culture. That's going to be a takeaway from this show. If you're looking for a great book in the CRE space, which we all know there's not a lot of them, I would put Gary in the top 2 authors. This book is phenomenal. I would put him right up there with Rod Santomassimo's Brokers That Dominate. If you have to read only 2 books in your commercial real estate career, I would read Gary's and Rod's. Phenomenal book, phenomenal person. Gary, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me, guys.
Absolutely. Gary, first, before we even get into how you built just a phenomenal company in life and friendships, I will say how I found you. As you know, I don't know who ran your marketing campaign for your book, but it was the best I'd ever seen. And it came across several different feeds. So it found me, however you did that. And it did a perfect trickle campaign and broke me down. I finally said, fine, I'll buy your book. And I read the book and I was like, wow, we got to have this guy on the show. This is a great book. So first of all, great marketing campaign.
Thank you very much. Thank you. You know, with a self-published book, I'll have to say you're looking at or speaking with the marketing director.
Wow.
It's been a fun little retirement project to sort of get in another space of book marketing. But, I'm sure I've annoyed a few people with all the emails I've sent, but I think I've got a lot of exposure as well.
You have. Well, great job. Phenomenal job. And again, great book. Gosh, there's so many things I want to touch base on, but first, you remind me in a lot of ways, my business partner here, Bill. You guys have a lot in common. Bill just recently ran his 50th marathon. I know both of you guys were at Boston, unfortunately, for the bombing, and then came back on that next run. So maybe I'll just let you guys kick it off and talk about your experience there.
So, I ran it for the first time in 2013, and I was in the finishing corral when both bombs went off.
Oh my gosh.
How about you, Bill? Were you done or?
We were having, I was back with my dad and my son, who at the time, one of my sons who was 4 turning 5 the next day. We were having lunch when the bombing happened, but we were staying at the Fairmont Hotel, which was only a couple blocks from obviously where the explosions took place. And so I remember, it's one of those things you never forget, right? But I was coming out of the hotel or out of the restaurant and holding my son and figuring out, everyone was running away from the hotel because that was kind of near where the action was. We got to the hotel, they checked our IDs and said, they had already had dogs in there and like sniffed out the hotel to make sure there was no bombs in there. And they got us into the hotel, put the hotel on lockdown for the remainder of the night. But I remember it. So tell us your story.
Well, what you're saying is, or what I'm gleaning is that you finished way before me. and you're already back in the hotel and taking a shower. So
I wish that was the case, Gary. I actually got hurt that year. It's an interesting story. I went in with a hurt calf muscle. I decided it was a great idea. I couldn't run for a week prior leading into it. And I decided I was going to try and PR. And at about mile 15, I was on pace to PR.
And Bill wouldn't tell you this, but the PR would be at like 2:36.
And so I was tracking along, and then mile 15, my calf just popped, and I couldn't walk, So unfortunately, no, I was having lunch, had not finished, but do remember it. So let's jump into your story.
Yeah, it was a tough race. Marathons are never easy for me. I'm not built for them. But it was a tough race. And I got to about mile 25 and a half and found my wife and gave her a kiss, gave her a high five, and continued on to the finish. Well, she walked past the second bomb, right up to where the first bomb was and near the finish, and said, "Gosh, this looks really crowded at the finish line. I'm going to take a left right here at the, the street and go down around behind the buildings." And right as she took the left, the bomb went off. And, for her, it really bothered her in the sense she didn't want to be around crowds for, a couple of years after that. For me, it just made me mad.
Yeah.
It sort of freaked her out and made me mad, but it was quite an experience. What I really did enjoy was going back in 2014. The atmosphere there was really celebratory, with the attitude of, we're not going to let these guys change our lifestyle. And, overall, it was just a really tragic event, as you guys know.
Yeah, I remember that next year as well. And the same thing that you just described, the, patriotism, like just the bond that the city had, right? And I remember coming down Boylston Street and having like tears in my eyes, right? Just like with emotion of, I don't even know what the emotion was, just like pride of like a great city. And but anyway, the next year was something special for sure, and really cool to see how that city came together that the following year and everything that went along with that. So that's awesome to hear you were back there and able to experience the following year as well.
Yeah, it was great. Getting my wife back there was not easy. But
sure
she didn't get anywhere near the finish line, but she enjoyed going back as well.
Well,
Yeah.
Gary, before we dive into, the book and some of the components of it, tell us a little bit about, prior to starting Trinity, what brought you into brokerage? Why brokerage? And I know you were an office broker and before starting Trinity. So tell us a little bit about those early years, kind of coming out of college, and how did you select brokerage, and what else did you do?
I was a banker coming right out of college. I did that with the mindset, thinking that as a corporate lender, I would get to see a lot of different businesses and try to figure out what I wanted to do. I really had no idea after college. And I had a dad that was in the real estate business. He had a residential agency. He dabbled in commercial a bit. And as a teenager, he talked to me a lot about real estate and about his projects. And I'm telling you, it all sounded Russian to me. I didn't understand a word of it, but, it was a comfortable thing. It was something that had been around. And so after being in banking for 3 years, I saw some of my peers that were my same age making 3 times the money I did as a banker. And so I chose the commercial real estate space.
Good selection.
Yeah.
It has been a great run.
It's worked out all right for you. It's always fascinating to me how people find the CRE space. Because, back when we all got started, it wasn't like a really well-known industry. And, obviously every year since then, it's gotten more and more popular, but I think it's the best industry out there. I wanted to ask you about one of the chapters in your book that kind of stood out to me, the chapter about overcoming success. You had a quote in there. I wrote it down. You need a healthy ego to be able to compete, but not one that hinders your drive and progress. I found that really interesting. Can you talk a little bit about that and what you mean?
I think the concept is that, you a lot of this business you need to have an ego to be competitive. If you didn't, you wouldn't care if you won or lost, right? But we've all seen people whose ego gets a little too inflated. And if you don't have that humility, then, you think, all right, I've arrived. I've done, once you reach a certain level, I've arrived and I can either put it on cruise control or, you start to think, well, this is an easy business. And the truth is, as you guys know, as much as you evolve and gain experience, so does your competition.
That's right.
And so you really have to guard against thinking that you've ever arrived. And one of the ways is to stay humble and realize you don't have all those answers. And you've got to continue to learn and grow in the business because everybody else is doing the same thing.
That's right. As a follow-up to that, I had heard, you say, I don't remember if it was the book or another podcast I listened to you on, but you said that you and your partners, you certainly loved to win, but more so you hated to lose. So talk to us a little bit about that, because it's interesting, keeping your ego down, but that drive to succeed for you and your two partners. And I know, unfortunately, you lost one, but really resonated with me because I think Bill and I hold that same feeling where you hate to lose.
You do. And I think it really, going back to the running, and I see a football jersey in Bill's background there, it comes from your athletic background for a lot of people. Right. And, when you're a competitive person, you don't ever, you're going to win some and lose some, but you don't want to lose because you haven't had the drive and the focus and the energy behind the project. You want to give it your best every time.
Yeah, it's so true. And, we talk too, and, in our industry, if you're not evolving, to your point earlier, you can quickly become irrelevant really quickly because it's such a competitive business. And so what's really fortunate for our team is, from an innovation standpoint, Matt does such a great job of just, driving the innovation and strategy for our team and staying ahead of it. And I attribute that to a lot of our success is Matt's innovation.
And I think another aspect of it is that, as you go through your career, what's great about real estate is that there are lots of different tangents to pursue. You guys talked about doing agency work, talked about doing tenant work, advising on build-to-suits. If you really don't grow over those years and challenge yourself to learn more, you can get burned out really easily. So it's not just about thinking you've arrived. It's about how do you keep it fresh, interesting, dynamic, and stay ahead of your competition.
That's well said, Gary. And that was kind of leading into my next question, which, how were you proactive versus reactive? I know you had a great quote from Wayne Gretzky. Maybe start there and talk to us about how you were proactive.
I think the Gretzky quote, and I might butcher it, was something to the effect of, he said, "I don't skate to where the puck has been. I skate to where the puck is going."
That's right.
And, I would say in general, my belief is this is a thinking person's business,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Loved when you said that.
And, I think the way we were proactive is that we were very strategic about our business. We all spend, and I wrote about this in the book, obviously, but we all spend our day dodging trees, running as fast as we can through the forest. And we don't really pick ourselves up to say, where are we headed? Are we headed in the right direction? So a combination of being strategic and, creating a roadmap for our business, because I think, and when you have that roadmap, you can be proactive and you can really think about, where am I going? What are the steps I need to get there? And, creating big goals through that vision and that roadmap, I like to think of it as sort of thinking 3 steps ahead as opposed to being reactive, because, you guys know that on any given day, you've got deals going on and transactions and details. You can spend your whole day being reactive.
That's
Yeah.
right.
That's a really good point.
Before you go on, Bill, I wanted to ask him one question on that. When you said this is a thinking business, I absolutely loved that. It was one of my favorite quotes that you said. As Bill mentioned, I think a lot about our business, a lot of strategy, and I actually put some time on my calendar each week. And I'm curious, you probably read the book by Malcolm Gladwell about the 10,000 hours, or at least heard of that in becoming an expert in something. There's another saying that I believe, which is, if you spend 18 minutes, it's a 100-hour philosophy on things. If you spend 18 minutes a day, that's 100 hours a week, or sorry, 100 hours a year, and you become 95% better than, anybody in the world at that, right? As kind of a side grind. And that's something that I truly believe. So I actually put a couple hours a week on my calendar for strategy, right? To think about it, look at our tech stack, look at where the industry is going to kind of, and I love to get out of the office when I do that. Did you do anything like that in your career purposely?
Yeah, absolutely. And that was, we each of the 3 of our original partners brought different skill sets to the table. That was my natural skill set to say, let's spend an hour a week sitting in a conference room, talking about the direction of our business, talking about, who are the tenants we're not calling on, who are the owners we're not calling on. And out of that meeting, and at first, David and Peter, they were both doers, and they didn't like sitting back and thinking about it all the time and talking about it. But over time, they got the strategic bug as well. And, they sort of felt like, all right, we need to get back together and think about our business, work on our business, not just do transactions. So yes, we did that very regularly.
That's great. That's smart. You're ahead of the time on that. And one of the things I think about is, you've had this incredible career, right? And it's evolved. This is a hard industry for young people, new people to enter into. And Matt and I take a lot of pride in really training the people that join our team as teammates and making sure they get the time, effort, and energy that they need. What would your advice today be to someone that's new into the industry?
I think the advice would be pretty simple, and that is just be curious. I was curious about how everything worked. How does a building get built? How do operating expenses work? How does when a developer builds a building, and this is when I'm a tenant rep broker, I'm curious about this, because really the more as a broker, you really have to think of yourself as a consultant. That's what I always did. Some people have the broker mindset. I'm going to just show these properties and hope they pick one that I show and hope I can get a commission. But the truth is, you're really a consultant. The more you know about our industry in depth, the more valuable you are to your client. And then the more valuable you are to your client, the more money you make. So be curious, ask lots of questions, never stop learning.
Love it. Gary, I'm going to ask you a little bit about your personal charitable work, but mostly on the homeless side. This is another thing that I loved about your book and your direction. I served on the board of Union Gospel Mission here in Seattle for about 8 years, had a heart for the homeless since I was a little kid. When I was a little kid, I used to beg my mom to make a bunch of sandwiches and go downtown and pass them out to what we used to refer to as bums. The homelessness back then were a lot of Vietnam vets that obviously had alcohol problems. You're related with what they went through. Homeless of today is completely different. You had somebody that touched your life, Buster, that I would love to hear about and hear about your passions with the homeless.
Yeah, when I was first married 33 years ago, we met a guy in the neighborhood, Buster Brown, Lewis Brown, who was homeless in the Dilworth area, the historic area near downtown Charlotte, and met him one time. Then I ran into him downtown on the way to work and saw him again in the neighborhood. And as a runner, I was out a lot, 5-6 days a week. And I would see him every time I was out. And I didn't know and we built a friendship. We became friends. And he came by the house a lot. We spent a fair amount of time together. And I didn't know it at the time, but that really led me into volunteering and then being on the board of Roof Above, which is Charlotte's fairly large homeless ministry. And so I've been involved in that for 17, 18 years now. And it's been a really good part of my journey because, when we're all blessed with so many things in our life, to whom much is given, much is expected.
That's right. Well, I love your passion for that. And you're an inspiration and thank you for your service on that for sure.
Thank you very much. You're welcome.
So Gary, you've had a wonderful career. You're living a great life. What would you say is the key to having a sustainable career and sustainable life like you're living today?
From a career perspective, early on, I had a senior broker I was working with, and he pointed out that your career is, going back to the running analogy, your career is a marathon, not a sprint. Mm-hmm. So as far as sustainability, I would say it's sort of a combination. When in the book I talked about our culture, one of the things about it in our culture was, keeping work-life balance, which is a concept that is many view as a millennial lifestyle today. We embraced that 25 years ago. Being passionate about what you do. And, I always found the real estate industry interesting, fascinating at times, but I was passionate about being the architect of two businesses, Trinity Partners and Trinity Capital, our brokerage and investment business. Having drive, but at the same time, humility. I think those are a big part of the journey. And then really the last thing is, for creating sustainability is never thinking that you've arrived. Because the minute you do, your competition's going to eat your lunch.
Well said, Gary. Gary, you've been a phenomenal guest on the show where I was really looking forward to this podcast and, meeting you is inspiring. I would remind, everybody, to jump on Amazon and find Creating Trinity. We'll leave a link here in the show notes. But your career, the way you built the company, the way you invested, the way you just loved your business partners, and what you built was very, very impressive. And I would recommend everybody to read this book. It's an inspiration, and certainly for young brokers. We didn't get really into it, but the way you invested was key to how you're going to really enjoy your retirement. So great job on that. Gary, thank you for joining us on the show. It was great to meet you.
Great to meet you guys as well. And hope to be able to meet you in person one day soon.
Yeah. Hey, Gary, I'd just like to end by saying, the most successful people I always tend to see and watch are very genuine. And you are a very genuine person. I know we've only spent a half hour together, but I can tell that. And so anyway, I appreciate you taking the time and sharing some words of wisdom with everybody.
You're very welcome. Thank you guys for doing the podcast.
Have a good one.
You too. Take care, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.